The stage is set as the Democratic National Convention gets underway. People from across the country showing their support for the Harris-Walz ticket. I spoke with delegates about the top issues in their states.
Cost of housing, being able to send your kids to school, the cost of food and gas, these basic things.
Workers' rights, to our economy, making sure that we're making the right investments in our economy.
Outside the convention, protesters voicing their opposition to the war in Gaza. The Harris-Walz campaign says they plan to address the issue.
You have a candidate like Kamala Harris that is going to get to the bottom of these challenging issues, be frank with both sides about what is needed to get to a place of reducing civilian casualties and making this terrible and tragic war over.
Much of the focus tonight will be on President Biden.
Senator Sanders, what do you want to hear tonight? What do you want to hear tonight from the president?
Good speech.
The 81-year-old was expected to accept the Democratic Party's nomination, but after nearly a half-century in public office, he's passing the torch.
His legacy is going to be that he saved democracy not once but twice. He saved it once by defeating Donald Trump in 2020, and he saved it once by actually stepping down and allowing Kamala Harris to be our first female president.
Tonight, Democrats will honor Biden's legacy as the party looks toward the future of a Harris-Walz ticket.
Democrats say while former President Trump puts himself first, their party is working for the American people, adding that President Biden exemplifies that by putting the American people's interest above his own. Tonight is arguably the largest audience and the biggest speech that Kamala Harris will give in her life as of right now. We do know that her remarks are going to wrap up a week of trying to convince voters that she is ready to lead the country. History in the making tonight as Kamala Harris, the first woman of color, will accept her party's nomination for president. The event capping off a convention of celebration and emotion.
Kamala Harris! Do something.
Kamala Harris is ready for the job.
All leading up to this moment that many have waited decades to see.
My nieces, nephews, grandchildren can say I too can be president or I can be nominated. I saw that in Shirley Chisholm.
I am the candidate.
During the 1972 presidential race, Shirley Chisholm became the first black candidate to seek a major party nomination and the first woman to run for the top spot on the Democratic ticket, paving the way for Harris.
This is what we dreamed of.
The excitement surrounding the campaign also comes with demands for progress. Pro-Palestinian protesters outside the convention this week continue their calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. We spoke to a leading voice in the uncommitted movement, representing a constituency largely absent from the convention over the administration's stance on the war.
So our message to now Vice President Harris is a hope of her to chart a new course, to differentiate herself from President Biden.
Tonight, Kamala Harris will outline her policy stances and make her case for voters to make history and take the momentum of the DNC to the campaign trail with the election just 75 days away. And tonight, Harris is expected to share her personal and professional story, as well as lay out her vision for the country in contrast to that offered by former President Trump. And something else that people are going to be looking for tonight is if Kamala Harris differentiates her policies from President Biden. Nearly 3 years after former President Trump's supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, our country continues to heal. Former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone sustained life-threatening injuries that day.
My concern is that too many Americans don't recognize the significance of January 6th.
Republican presidential candidates were asked about the lessons the country learned.
You know, I don't think it was supposed to be, that was not supposed to happen. I think people went to protest, and I think it got out of hand.
I think that we owe it, all of us, to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Going into what is going to be a divisive 2024 election cycle, what do you think the most important thing someone like a President Biden can do?
Fight like hell. To me, the only issue that matters is securing the future of our democracy.
President Biden using an historic backdrop, Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where soldiers fought in the Revolutionary War, to deliver his first major re-election campaign speech of the year.
January 6th, a date forever shared in our memory because it was on that day that we nearly lost America, lost it all. Today, we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause?
Fanon, who was on the front lines at the U.S. Capitol, has this message.
Well, I'm not a politician. I'm just an average American, and I'm telling you that this is the most significant election of my lifetime.
An unforgettable moment in 2021, now playing a key role in the 2024 presidential election.
NBC News correspondent Brie Jackson is in Charleston, where she sat down with some black women voters ahead of tomorrow's primary.
Across the country, black women are a key voting bloc. The same goes for here in South Carolina. I sat down with a group of women in Charleston to have an open conversation about the 2024 election. Charleston, South Carolina, known for its rich history, culture, picturesque streets, and politics. Just by a show of hands, who's excited for the 2024 election?
Excited.
We gathered this group of black women voters ahead of the state's Republican presidential primary. Their backgrounds, ages, and political views vary, but we found many of the same issues drive them to the polls.
Women's maternal health. Someone my age may not have the same rights in terms of reproductive health that a generation before me had.
Also top of mind, crime, student loan debt, and state efforts to ban books.
As an African-American literature professor, that is something that is very concerning.
There are concerns about the overall political climate.
It's divisiveness, it's opposition, it's social issues being politicized.
Despite dividing his time between the courtroom and the campaign trail, former President Trump leads the state's former governor, Nikki Haley, by double digits.
I am more so dismayed with the fact that in the year 2024, we would even consider someone who is under indictment.
At 81 years old, President Biden also faces challenges.
His age is a huge barrier.
Black women, a key voting bloc, but far from a monolith. Each one here voicing their own views.
Table discussions like this where we are comfortable and able to speak in layman's terms, to bring up issues, to get a little bit messy around the topics.
A conversation turning to action this election cycle.
We got to vote. We have to vote.
And tonight, former President Trump is scheduled to be the keynote speaker at the Black Conservative Federation Gala in Columbia, South Carolina.
Their heritage and lifestyle are now at risk because of climate change. NBC News correspondent Brie Jackson has a look at the efforts to save their culture.
God, quite trouble the water. You can see how the little ripples and things like that going like that.
Water, essential to all, but even more precious for Gullah Geechee communities, working to maintain their distinct way of life away from the mainland.
That allowed our Africanisms, as others call it, to continue to evolve here in this land, but to also amalgamate into this unique Gullah Geechee culture. And so we say we the Vinya, we in the Guayna, we're Toto.
We traveled to St. Helena, South Carolina to meet Queen Quet, chiefess of the Gullah Geechee Nation. Descendants of slaves, they're known for their unique language and traditions like basket weaving. For decades, they've retained their culture despite the landscape around them changing.
The movement of the Gullah Geechee as part of the Great Migration brought culinary traditions, food traditions, spiritual traditions to the rest of the United States.
Before, the issue was bridges coming in and bringing people in who were overbuilding and displacing us.
Now, one of the biggest concerns is climate change. Increased storm surge and rising sea levels threaten their land and lifestyle.
That causes more flooding. is causing saltwater inundation in places that were freshwater areas, which also impacts some people's farming ability.
Queen Quet tells me rising temperatures are also taking a toll.
Our oysters we won't have, nor will we have shrimp or crabs if the ocean acidifies.
I'm Geechee. I grew up eating crabs. There's a lot of crabs on the table throughout my life.
Tia Clark runs a business in Charleston, South Carolina, focused on catching blue crabs, a key ingredient in Gullah Geechee cuisine.
It has changed my life and put me in this place to come outside every day and share my culture.
Clark says the water brings her closer to her culture, but she's seen conditions for the wildlife decline.
With climate change, if it stays this warm, then the crabs are around, which means there's going to be a lot of pressure put on them by me and other people that are trying to catch them.
To help, conservationists are building oyster reefs to create a habitat for sea creatures to survive.
Look at where that line is from here for how this reef is protecting the grass. When we start losing some of these resources and when it really starts hitting home and affecting more people is when some real change is going to happen.
This is an effort to ensure survival.
Absolutely. Every part of what we're doing is to ensure our survival as Native Gullah Geechees and the survival of our tradition.
A fight against climate change to preserve their way of life. In South Carolina, Brie Jackson, NBC News.